Reacting versus responding. People go into that mode when they don't have the answers.
One of the best ways to build a relationship is that in-person interaction.
I'm not sure what tomorrow's going to look like, but I do know what I can control and influence within my sphere.
The better your retention numbers, the likelier the clients will stay with you.
People need to self-empower themselves. We can't wait for someone to come knocking at our door and here's the opportunity or here's the problem.
Welcome to the podcast From Cold to Close. My name is Saeed and I'm the founder here at SRC Growth Partner, a company that works with professional services firms from around the world to help them increase their revenue and profitability by acquiring new clients. My guest today is Rebecca Shambaugh, the president and founder of Shambaugh Leadership, where she helps a breadth of organizations build high-performing and collaborative leaders and teams. Rebecca is a recognized expert in executive leadership and organizational transformation and began her journey by championing women in leadership, founding one of the first executive programs for women in the US. Today, her work has expanded to help organizations create workplaces where all individuals across genders and identities can thrive and contribute fully. She's a trusted advisor to Fortune 500 executives, a TEDx speaker, and a passionate voice for more agile, resilient, and results-focused leadership in today's evolving workplace. Rebecca, welcome to the podcast.
Saeed, thank you so much. It's great to be here. I appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, no worries at all. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. It's one of my favorite topics to talk about in terms of your expertise, and that's leadership. And leadership is, to me, something that I strive to be able to do within my organization. But I know many business leaders, many people in organizations looking to advance their career are always looking to be the best type of leader as possible to be able to help their careers as well. So I always like to start off every single podcast really starting off with your journey to founding Shambaugh Leadership and how you got to where you are today. So could you share some insights to our listeners and viewers?
Happy to. I'll give you a little bit of that journey. Prior to starting Shambaugh almost 29 years ago now, I served in corporate roles for 3 Fortune 50 companies. I traveled through as a human resource, labor relations, production, got into all the different aspects of the business. And I was working for a Fortune 50 company. My first job, I was the first woman to really be kind of a production manager in a manufacturing facility. And at that time, there weren't any other women doing what I was doing. I really felt like I was the only kind of that Twilight Zone experience, but I have to say it was the best leadership development experience I could ever go through. But I continued to evolve in that role and then in other corporate roles in business operations and human resources and leadership development, still learning that and finding that I was the really only one that was showing up as a woman at the table. Not that we're talking about gender today, but I realized long ago that sometimes women would take themselves out of those opportunities, right? They wouldn't take those stretches. They wouldn't understand their value and reach out and ask for those things that they wanted and needed. They wouldn't speak up and share their perspective, take a pass on building relationships with influential people that, well, why me? Why would they talk to me? And I'm not saying I naturally did it, but I always was willing to take a stretch and to learn kind of that growth mindset, if we call that today. But I realized a long time ago that while women weren't showing up, they weren't taking those risks, they didn't know their full ability to influence, that they were really in charge of their career. It was not only a loss for them, but it was a loss for organizations and the customers they serve. And I also realized as I was growing up in those younger years and evolved into leadership, because I was the only, that was a unique value that I created for myself and for others. And it wasn't lonely anymore. That was almost my superpower. And so I leveraged some of those unique strengths and having a different perspective than sometimes other people may have, whether it was based on gender or the professional differences that I might have had or sitting on this side of the enterprise. So sometimes when you feel like you're the only, it really is your superpower. So you need to learn how to use that. And so as I evolved into the corporate leadership roles and executive roles, I knew that eventually I wanted to evolve and to do something. I was intrinsically motivated. And of course, the leadership space and with women, I wanted to really help to be an active participant in clearing that gap as best as I could. So I did some research and net of it all, we created a coaching program and then an executive leadership program for women around the country and the globe. It was very, very transformational, I would say, and a deep immersion for women to really found this to be a go-to program for their high potentials and continues to evolve as a coaching development program for women to really looking at organizational practices. And now here we come to the current state. We're taking all those models and really bringing men and women together now as one. to
Mm.
really explore their leadership and knowing that each and every leader is important in an organization. So that's how I got there. It was really a sense of my own personal experience. Wanted to fill a gap, a void, that great sense of purpose and mission, and then created a board to get things started close to 20 years ago around that piece of work that we did, and continue to write and do podcasts and speak at events and conferences on our recent work. Just still, leadership is dynamic, right?
Mm.
And so there's no one right way at any time. And sometimes what got you here may not get you there. So it keeps us on our toes at Shambaugh, and it keeps us learning and bringing along leaders as well to do the same.
I absolutely love that. And what I got from that was that you walk the walk so you can talk the walk, right? And that's a lot of what leadership really is as well. Like being able to, once you've done it yourself and knowing what it takes to be a leader and do specific things, and whether that specific strengths that led to where you ended up going, and then being able to evolve what you already know and help other people. And that's what I also love about your journey as well, is the fact that you took what you did and you took what you did great, and then you went and go, well, let me serve other people and help them also do a similar thing. So I think that's really great. You yourself are a best-selling author, right? And one of your books talks about the concept of sticky floors. Can you tell me and the listeners and viewers out there more about this level of thinking? What's the concept behind it?
So the sticky floors is based on some research and work we did around pipeline studies and analysis, and looked at men and women in the pipeline. And early on in that pipeline, men and women in general, I will say, were running parallel in their career. And then after 5, 6 years, women somehow would fall behind. And it wasn't because they wanted to take time off to be mother and have family. No, it wasn't that. So we looked into some of the organizational cultural issues, but we also took a deep dive into where women were, how they were showing up in that internal narrative, that story that was going on in their head. And we realized that while there were and still are organizational construction issues and obstacles, I think sometimes and even more, we can hold ourselves back from reaching our fullest potential. That's not always a vertical move to be the executive in the executive C-suite. Whatever you define as success, whatever you define as being aspirationally something that you want to achieve. And so we coined this self-limiting narrative. I have to be perfect at everything. A is best and nothing less. Or such as, well, gosh, I need to develop my network, but I need to first get my work done, and then I'll go out and build relationships with Saeed and other people that I don't know. And so that's really gets down to what we call a self-limiting narrative that unconsciously sometimes can hold us back. Let me just say that women may have sticky floors, but men have sticky floors. Organizations have sticky floors. And it's not that they're not well intended, it's just that they continue to run on old habits that don't work for them anymore. And so that's a lot of the basis of the sticky floors. And so first book I wrote was on It's Not a Glass Ceiling, It's a Sticky Floor. What my publisher said, this is always going to be a timeless book because each chapter, whether it's perfectionism, building your board of directors to navigating organizational dynamics and change, these are all areas that are going to still be existing no matter how, organizations and the environment and our own selves as leaders evolve.
I think it's such an interesting point, and it's a really great way to coin a phrase in the sense that everyone knows about the glass ceiling, but that sticky floor really does stop you from heading towards a certain direction. I think it's a really fascinating topic there. You speak to many business leaders in your network and in conferences, as you mentioned. What have they been saying as the big trends and issues in organizations today?
Well, I mean, if you would have talked to me, gosh, say even 3 months ago, it might have been a different conversation. Right now, there's been a lot of shifts happening based on external forces. Companies are really backing more into reorganizing, a lot of transformation. This is a new boss now. After 2 years, I've got 3 bosses now that I've been kind of churning through. So there's a lot of ambiguity. There's a lot of change. There's a lot of unknowns on the outside. And so I think from a macro perspective and advising leaders and CEOs, I think no matter what the language or the narrative is or the noise out there, just focus on the things that matter within your organization. So this is why culture is so important. What is your culture? How do you define it? What are those norms and the values that embody that culture? What are the expectations based on that culture that you expect from everyone in terms of how they lead? Because leadership isn't always a position title, right? It's your significance. It's ideas you bring to the table. It's inspiring and motivating others and differentiating and helping the organization to have an innovative edge, if you will. So it's not about title, but everyone is a leader. So I think it's the word inclusion, right? It's still important. but it translates into building an inclusive team where you really look at cognitive diversity and tapping onto a wider range of voices and experiences to really leverage greater creativity and innovation. Yeah, it is about differences and backgrounds because we serve a global diverse marketplace. So if I'm a large company and I'm serving globally, I need to have perspectives over in Asia Pac. I need to have perspectives from a women's perspective. I need to have it in Latin America. So really takes on even a stronger fold. And people do need stability right now. And I think leaders getting out there, reminding them of what they stand for, what their mission is, how those values are emulated, and engage with folks in storytelling, that how you tapped into the company values today in leading people through a tough time, right? Dealing with ambiguity and change. Now, if you look at leadership, I don't know what you're seeing or feeling, but a lot of people are reacting right now, reacting versus responding. People go into that mode when they don't have the answers, when they feel emotionally charged up, when there's a lot of ambiguity and they don't have control, or they're working too hard and they're burnout. So we call these triggers, right? And so I think reacting versus responding. Sometimes when you are triggered, you make bad decisions. You show up in a room and all of a sudden the energy was this and now it's just tilted and it's low and people are just disengaged. You're not inspiring.
Yeah.
People don't want to hang out with you, right? There's many, many things. So it's the tone you set in the room, it's the energy that you bring, it's the words that you use. If you're inspiring or you're disempowering. And so if we can just be more mindful and put the pause button on, and when we coach a lot of leaders and executives at Shambaugh, and one of the techniques that I use is before you come into a room, you go into an important conversation, take 18 seconds or 20 seconds to have a vision for what you want to create in that room when you come in and you leave. What is that picture? What do you want to create? How do you want to serve those people? What do you want to walk away with? And what do you want them to walk away with and do? And so that's how you step into a conversation, right? And those behaviors, that mindset, how you exude your nonverbals is a direct correlation to what is the outcome that you want to produce. We just don't take time to do that. Leadership right now is a major service in our organizations and our teams and as individuals. And I think we just have to be very mindful and intentional in terms of how we show up and the impact that we're having.
I think it's so fascinating, some of the points you mentioned there, and you touched on a lot of points there, starting with culture and going all the way into how you're more intentional in your day to day and actually showing up with a more intentional method of approaching things. Don't react, be proactive. Don't react, respond, right? And it's so important to understand. And emotions do get the better of us, and emotions can often dictate how we move around in this world and how we make our decisions. Often what we find is we make the best decisions when we remove emotion from it and we respond to situations. We think objectively. So I think it's a really great point. And I really wanted to touch on going back to your initial point on culture and the evolution of culture that's happened over the years. One significant point happened not too long ago. Well, I say not too long ago. It feels like it's not too long ago. It was the pandemic, right? The workplace evolved very quickly following the pandemic. And there was a period where people were talking about the great resignation, right? And there was a huge increase in employee disengagement, destructive cultures, hard to build a culture in a remote working environment, things like that. And many organizations were really struggling to try and build that culture. What are the most common blind spots you see in how companies are approaching re-engagement efforts post pandemic and bringing those leaders to drive their teams again?
I think they're still trying to figure it out. Everybody, right? But there's been some research and findings that people, if they can connect and feel part of something bigger than themselves, we all know that they're more engaged, they're more purposeful, they are willing to do that work at a discretionary level. And to be quite honest, I think in some ways when COVID hit, a lot of us were in the office, but still a lot of companies were working fine in a virtual environment. A lot of the tech companies started the virtual environments and it wasn't all that bad. And people actually were very productive at home. But I think there's a plus and minus to everything, right? I think if you don't know how to manage, and I think management got a little sloppy, if you will, or complacent in getting a pulse of their folks working in their home office, not just from a productivity perspective, but were they really feeling connected to the team? Did they really have a greater sense of clarity and purpose of what they were doing and why they were doing it? Were they exuding and demonstrating time management skills? Were they getting up, focusing on the right priorities? Are we just fire hosing them stuff to get it done by next week? And they lost that guidance of how to really prioritize that. And I do think that there is something about as human beings. I think we're all better when we feel a part of something and a community.
Sure.
And I think with all the technology, and we didn't even know what Zoom was several years ago, Microsoft Teams, they all like, scaled up, and thank God for all of that. But I just feel like there's more isolation with this not in the office unless you're purposeful about getting people in at the right time for the right things to do and to connect. But I think a lot of times we do need that connection, and it's comfortable just staying back. So I think leaders need to better assess people in their lives. For example, people who are handicapped. How are you going to accommodate them at work now when they've had everything set up to do their work at home? And maybe the organization set that up for them. What if it's a husband and wife that have two more kids? And how are they going to do that with maybe not being able to afford, school for the kids to go to, or nursery school, daycare? So those are things that we can't just pull the trigger. I still think we need to be tailored a little bit and sensitized toward that. But I do think people do and would benefit from coming in, but they need to have something to come into that's purposeful. So here's a great thing to create innovation teams, SWAT teams to work on specific client issues, white space to really ideate when you're in the room for 2 days, to really have something purposeful to not only work on together, but to get to know one another. And 1 + 1 = 6, right? So I think we'll see how it goes, but I think there's some push and pull about that. But I think there's pluses and minuses, but I do think the ability to get inside. And I will tell you, we repurposed all of our leadership programs during COVID and even afterwards for clients to do virtually. And it's nice because it's inclusive. We work with a lot of global audiences, so they can participate when we're doing something here in the US. But when you bring them in the house, in the office, or at an event venue, the energy, the connectivity, the engagement, and the desire to roll up their sleeves and really do the work around the work and their growth is unbelievably high and positive. So there you go. I don't have the right answer, but I think there's a balance there somewhere.
I think you touched on some really interesting points, especially working in a more global economy, in a more global world, and being able to bring in the right type of people with the right type of backgrounds to be able to provide a different perspective to the same situation, right? And it's really interesting to hear how that can affect organizations when they're trying to go in a specific direction. There's been obviously considerable ambiguity going around DEI initiatives recently. How do you advise leaders to reframe these kinds of conversations to focus on the fundamental business benefits of diverse perspectives?
Well, I think it's getting back to the basics and what inclusion and diversity really are, right? I always think that diversity is a fact. Diversity is a diversity of ideas, people, statistics, diversity of statistics to experiences that all come together as one to serve the better good, greater good. Inclusion is really a behavior. And so clients that we're working for, we've worked a lot in the just general leadership, men and women, but also around the women's space. But they've come to believe that we're not going to back out of what's important to us, but we're going to focus on all. It's for everyone, right? And so, we're taking our women's leadership programs and we're bringing in men and women together to focus on a lot of the same components of that and working to see themselves as one and to really further develop together and to learn. And in some ways, it's an opportunity to establish greater, stronger relationships and connections and to better understand and be sensitized toward how we experience work, how you do, how can we collaborate and be stronger partners together versus doing it in separate rooms. Time and place for everything, right? But I think organizations are very clear. The ones that are successful have come out and said that, whether you call it diversity and inclusion, whether you call it collaboration and innovation, this has been good for our business. Our market, stock has gone up because of the diversity of talent and backgrounds that we have been able to bring to the table to ideate, to really engage in more constructive, effective decision making and problem solving, right? Building an inclusive growth strategy, right, is also important. You just can't grow an organization in silos. So it really takes an interconnected enterprise and ecosystem to do that. And so inclusion takes on, more than just in a room and feeling included. It's much broader than that. And I think that's how organizations are evolving to look at this, to really be competitive and to really tap into the wider range of the best talent and helping them to feel like they do belong and they're a part of something. And I will tell you, belonging is another word that I'm seeing out there that's being used, but there's a direct correlation. If somebody feels like they belong to a community, a team, an organization, the data will say that there are greater levels of performance, trust, and engagement when you look at folks who belong. And so it's a win-win for everybody.
I couldn't agree more. And building leaders to be able to effectively do these types of things can only help an organization, right? It can only teach the right kind of behaviors, the right kind of attitudes, and the right kind of perspectives to be able to move everything in the right direction. I want to talk to you about building an effective leader, right? Because leadership is a common topic that everyone wants to talk about. Everyone feels like they have an idea of what leadership actually is or what it takes. But what's the energy that a good leader provides? What are the behaviors that a good leader has? How is it? How does a good leader affect an organization or a team or a silo, whatever it might be?
I think leaders in today's world, and I think always successful leaders, I think is embracing the constant change is going to be going around, being able to deal with, I'm not sure what tomorrow's going to look like, but I do know what I can control and influence within my sphere. So I think it's really important when you're dealing with change and ambiguity is to understand, don't again be triggered and just do things that are mindlessly not thoughtful, but know what you can control and what you can have impact on. People need to feel like they are contributing, like they're making progress. And that goes same for their team. So don't freeze, number one, but think about what is it in my reach? What can I influence and control and impact that given this current state? And sometimes we realize if we have that mindset, we didn't know we could have that much influence and impact on areas when you go through a lot of this tumultuous transformation and necessary reorganization. So I think that's one thing. I think the other thing is don't think you're the smartest one in the room. Some people call that ego. Some people call it just, I know everything you don't. But I think always wear the hat of curiosity, right? Always be curious. Always want to know, how they were able to be successful. Ask thoughtful questions. Be open to being wrong, right? So I think because of that, in myself included, I would like to say that my trajectory or whatever, my success in my career, my life has because I've had a diversity of people around me at given times in different places and situations that I call my personal board of directors or my posse, whatever you want to call, that became wonderful, supportive thought partners. So no one is an island here. And I think the more that you can expand your aperture and look at relationships across the enterprise to better connect the dots of what they see around their role, around some of the opportunities, challenges, what success looks like. Understand from them how they see problems that could be different than yours, or build upon their expertise and knowledge that you may not have. So I think knowing that you're not the smartest one in the room, be a collaborator, be curious, ask questions, and making sure that you reassess your current stakeholder plan, your current network, to making sure that you don't have the same people around you, because the network that you had 6 months ago may not be the right network that you need now to navigate new opportunities, new challenges, current state of your role and career, right? So you need to continue every 6 months to reassess that. So this all sort of unwinds with how we're coaching a lot of leaders and executives right now. Having that great currency of relationships, people that aren't like you, that will challenge you, will give you constructive feedback, that will stretch your thinking, maybe open up a door for you that you couldn't see or you didn't have access to, right? I think that's the other thing. I think it's also being willing to take risks, get out of our comfort zone. One big thing now is technology and AI. So every leader, wherever, what seat you're sitting in, needs to understand how AI can benefit their role, how they can leverage and manage that and enrich their decision making, enrich their research, enrich just simply how you write an email. What's the best way to put this report together? And so that's where the curve is going. It's going very quickly. But when you get online and just do a quick 1 hour tutorial, or your organization offers a class for any domain, that you don't have to be in technology to understand how to embrace AI and technology to really bring that into your day to day. But I think that's really important. I also think, again, as I opened up here, realize the impact that you're having. I learned a long time ago, leaders are in a fishbowl, and how they show up, whether they know it or not, is impacting other people. So be thoughtful around that. Have a vision of what you want your team to do and what is the best way, what is the best style, communications, the energy, the presence that you convey, the clarity and the conciseness. All those things are basics, but so important. Right now, people need stability, right? And so they need folks that can help them weather the storm, listen, support them, hear what they say, provide a vision of why and how this connect the dots of why and how you're going to support this. But I also think it's not to be provide uninformed optimism, the sugarcoating. So learn about transparency and share the correct information, right? And get behind that. But knowing that this is going to only improve, but we need to know where we're starting and what our current state is. I think those are just, a few other important things that we just can't lose sight of in terms of how we're showing up as leaders day to day. And I always say, keep your eye on the middle of the storm, right? That's where the calmness is. That's where the centeredness is. Catch yourself and don't get engaged. Don't let yourself get into cognitive distortions. Assess before you assume a situation or an individual or relationship, right? I think looking at somewhere in between stimulus and response is an opportunity for growth.
Yeah.
So again, many, many things I could share.
When someone is becoming a leader, obviously they have specific skills that they might have. They might be weaker in one area than other, and being able to be transparent and have humility in your approach. Some people might struggle with that and they have to learn that, whereas someone might be more confident in their approaches in a different skill set. You've worked with numerous organizational cultures and exceptionally large organizations. What elements consistently appear in resilient cultures, people, leaders that can weather significant change and uncertainty?
Well, I mean, it probably has a slightly different context with organizations, but I
Yeah.
would say across the board, people first,
Yeah.
take risk, grow, be curious, innovate, and build connections across the company. Connect. Don't wait for people to come. And I think the last one is just to people need to self empower themselves. We can't wait for someone to come knocking at our door and say, here's the opportunity or here's the problem. I think we have to step up to our leadership and have a voice, have a perspective, even if it's a little challenging or scary the first time. So I think a lot of the themes that are echoing throughout the chambers of many of these organizational cultures. She mentioned something really important around connections and relationships, the posse, the board of directors. Speaking to a group a few weeks ago and a number of leaders, and, we talked about relationship currency and then this whole, you need to invest like a bank account. You need to invest in those relationships. You need to nurture those relationships. You need to sometimes activate those on your own and reach out and do that. Don't wait for the weak ties to come to you. You need to sort through and go find those weak ties, right? Because you probably will very well need them someday. But I think what's coming back, and I think we'll see more of a trend is while LinkedIn and all the other sort of network sort of connectivity tools are going to be still in, what's going to come back in is you can't beat the one-on-one at a conference, going into the office to meet your client or to meet your manager or customer, whatever that is. If you decide your team is going to have a big meeting, go into the office and be part of that and be an active participant and fill that seat. I think those are the things I think are really going to have meaning as we move forward in these times is to have that one-on-one traditional, call it traditional, call it old school, but I see that coming back.
100%. I think it's a phenomenally important skill that I think is being lost almost at the moment, but I think 100% it's coming back. For example, with most of our clients, we will go out and before we even have worked with them, we'll either met with them in some way, shape, or form, or if once we've started working with them, we'll go out and visit them. And we always find that that's one of the best ways to build a relationship is that in-person interaction, and building that network and building an in-person rapport, right? Because there's so much that can be done over screens and things like that, and clients are happy with that nowadays more so than ever. But you said it right there, the scalability of your network by being in person, it massively helps your opportunities. So in this segment of the podcast, we like to call the Entrepreneur's Room, and this is a series of questions we like to ask all of our guests to give our viewers and listeners an opportunity to understand how business leaders and owners think. And the first question I like to ask at this stage of every podcast is, how are you currently spending your days as a leader of the business?
I'm spending my days as a leader to don't just wait for things to happen. Look around the corner, look at some of the trends, engaging a lot with our existing clients to check in to see what their state is right now. Just if nothing else, to support them, how we can repurpose or make a pivot. So staying close in touch with team at Shambaugh and with our clients and to really continue to have a wider aperture of what's happening out there. So I think that's a big part of it. And I think the other thing is just 2 months ago, 3 months ago, 6 months ago, what clients needed then is different now. Even in coaching, one-on-one exec coaching is really fine tuning what people were challenged with. Some of the same aspects of coaching for executives, such as executive presence and emotional intelligence and building out teams and inspiring leadership, decision making. But I think there are some nuances that we really want to dig into, making sure we have the current contexts of being relevant. So I think meeting somebody that's really important. I would say a big banner is just being relevant right now.
So true. Relevance is such an important aspect in any area, and it's really interesting to hear that. I always love that question because I always hear what is top of mind business leaders and owners. So it's really interesting. As a leader of the business, what are the most important metrics to you? And that could be anything, but what's important to you when you're running your business?
It's not so much the number of clients that we have, but it's the retention, the value prop that we create, and we can get that data from pulse surveys to valuations to internal data that the company will share with us on how we've been able to move the needle. So I think we've been successful in, it's not really a metric because I think some of it's qualitative and quantitative. But look, people right now want solutions. They want folks to be relevant. They want a consultant to come in like ours. He's been around the block for many years. You need to establish credibility with them right away. Right. So I think it's meeting them where they're at, understanding their business, understanding what's top of mind for them, and them being prescriptive as opposed to just something off the shelf, if you will. I think at least our line of work. So I think it's that being really prescriptive. But I think you can measure some of that success. You can increase your number of clients. You can increase the size of your clients. We have some pretty large client size organizations. But I also think it's the qualitative, it's the relationship management. It's like we're working with a client now that's big reorganizations. Person we worked with for 10 years is retired, trying to help this other person come up to speed, right? Internally. We probably know more about the culture and the workings than this person does. So it's real partnerships, right? Helping them to understand the workings of the business and how the enterprise works and what historically has happened and what's working and what's not working, right? To set them up, not only just for success, but to really help create a really strong partnership for mutual success. So I think that's also really important. I think it's understanding partnerships, but knowing that it's just not this one event. It's how do you help represent the whole organization in terms of what their shifts are, what their changes are, what their culture is, what their success measures are. I think that's much more of an important approach as opposed to sometimes the number of clients that you have. It's the value that you create. Because what happens when you do, you continue to get more work, they refer you to other people. It's just how we've been able to succeed in our business.
I think it's a really interesting point you mentioned there. And one of the first things you said there was retention. And I think that retention often is the marker of a really great business, right? If the better your retention numbers, the likelier the clients will stay with you, the more likely you are to have a robust business. So I think it's really interesting that you mentioned retention as your number one of your first points. In terms of growing the business itself, and I know you mentioned retention is always important and rather than always looking for the new client and bringing in new clients, but how are you currently growing the business? What kind of business development activities are you currently running?
I think one of the things that I don't know if I didn't get into this yet, but we're very research based, we're evidence based, so we just finished up a major research study, took about a year and a half. So I think that's really important for us to continue our brand, to link everything that we do and how we do it based on the research. So is that about growing? I think it is. It expands our thought leadership. It gives us some credibility up front. It helps us to create greater value and connect the dots with our clients, right? Who are struggling. I think that's important. I think growing, I mean, personally, I've grown this company as well as the quality of the work we do. But I think if you're owning a company, if you're an entrepreneur, you want to grow your company, you have to get out there. You have to be an active participant in the community. I've written 3 or 4 books. I've published with various publications that you might be familiar with. And again, you have to get out there and meet with other people, talk with other people, keep tracking the trends so you can be relevant. So that's, some basic principles there. But sometimes fast growth isn't always the most important because you can lose your quality of your brand. It just takes one person that's working for you that can just make an unintentional mistake. Right. So I think as you grow, which we've scaled, we've added on a lot more people in the team, is onboarding them, making sure that they understand the culture here at Shambaugh. We have core values in this organization that they need to align with and practice. Right. So as you grow, you need to also continue to maintain or evolve that brand consistently with congruency with your clients. So that to me is a big formula for successful growth.
I love that. It's not scale for the sake of scale. It's a scale to create a robust business, right? A robust and culture-filled business that knows exactly what it's doing from head to toe from every single member within the organization. So I think that's really interesting. The last question I want to ask, the final question I ask in every single podcast that we do is, if you had a magic wand you could wave to solve one business problem, what would that be? How are you currently growing the business?
Yes, I think during these times, call them turbulence, call them just the unknown. If right now things are just, I call it a bad fever. We just don't know where everything's going to end up. But people are responding. They're a little bit frazzled to a lot of not, knowing where the course is going to take us. But that's okay. But I do hope that these changes, this recalibration, this resorting through the culture, the language, the things that we do and how we do it and for who, I hope that finds a new equilibrium for the power of one, for all of us, right? That we come to a place where people really are valued, that we know how to manage, we know how to lead them as one body of intelligence, as one body of human beings that best serve the mission of what we do. And so I don't know if that word is inclusion, but I hope we do find a balanced equilibrium where we can balance people with business performance and results, right? Because that's to me is the best formula for success. So I'm hopeful for that. And I'm also hopeful for the younger generation of leaders coming up who I think a lot of them have that lens perspective. We're in it together,
Mm.
right? Opposed to segmenting and putting people in boxes and language that disenfranchises others. And I know it's not all that. It is about the business. It is about innovation and creativity. But I hope that we can find this new balance that nurtures the organization, the soul of the organization, and its people.
Rebecca, it's been fantastic speaking with you. Thank you very much for sharing your time and your insights. It's been a fascinating conversation and really loved it. For all our viewers and listeners out there, if they wanted to reach out to you, if they wanted to find out more, where would they find you? Where would they go?
Two things. You can go on our website, www.shambaughleadership.com, or you can email me at rshambaugh@shambaughleadership.com. Love to hear from you.
We'll put everything into the description of this podcast. But Rebecca, thank you so much again for today. It's been fantastic.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.